I was asked to begin this presentation with a song, and after speaking with Ben about some choices, I wanted to go back into Midland history and do one of the top 10 old favorites. And so we have chosen We Gather Together, which was Kathy Munger's favorite hymn. It's really a Thanksgiving hymn, but I think we have plenty to be thankful for today and every day at Midland. And there should be some word sheets. They're on pretty fancy paper. So if you don't have one, get near somebody who does. I'm thankful for my group who will be leading you, but I expect audience participation.
That was terrific. I'd forgotten the third verse. Welcome, everybody. My name is John Martin. I am president of the Midland Alumni Association. All alumni who are here, raise your hands. You are members of the Midland Alumni Association. I bet you didn't know that. I'm very pleased to welcome alumni, parents, friends. I especially want to welcome parents because you've put your faith in Midland, and events such as today help, I think, to show you that your faith is well placed. This morning, we are engaging in the almost annual ritual of recognizing an alumnus or alumna of Midland who has made distinct contributions both to Midland and the larger world. So why do we name this award after John Dreyfus? John, class of 1952, whose family is well represented here by a host of his relatives. I'm not going to name all of them, except for his grandchildren, Emma and Lana, who are here as students. And there are a whole bunch of others here. I'd ask you to raise your hands, but it would just be too big of a crowd. John was a perfect example of somebody who stayed connected to Midland throughout his life. First, he married the headmaster's daughter. That was a pretty good move. Subsequently, he took on the challenge of teaching at Midland, including my freshman algebra class, which I believe sent him in search of new professional opportunities in other fields. In later years, John served as a member of Midland's Board of Trustees, as a parent, and a general supporter of the school. John Dreyfus's example shows us what the phrase Midland community means. We are part of this extraordinary place throughout our lives, as students, as alumni, as parents, and in other roles. And as alumni, we carry into the world the values and skills we acquire at Midland. Those values and skills may also be used to help Midland itself. Through this award, we honor those who are examples of great stewardship. Stewardship simply means leaving a place better than you found it. And today's honoree, Ben Munger, is a great example of that. In the next few minutes, you are going to hear a good deal about Ben from three people who know him well. Former faculty member Ellen Russell, his friend and colleague V.G. Cressy, class of 1968, his wife Lori Munger, Midland's Dean of Studies, and I'm going to come back and fill in a few details and join Will Graham in introducing Ben, presenting the award, and then you will hear from the man himself. So without further ado, let me ask Alan Russell to come to the podium and share a few words about Ben.
Thank you. I hope you all noticed that John put a great deal of emphasis on the next few minutes. So I think he meant for me to be brief. That was the main reason for that. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here today. It's been some time since I stood on this platform up here, but it all looks familiar out there to some degree. August the 25th, 1964, was a typical summer day here in the San Ynez Valley. It was warm. Diane and I were not too tired yet. We had been unloading boxes and stacking books and putting clothes away in the little art guild over here that you might remember it. What you see there now is just a shadow of what was there before. It was a small cabin. In fact, it was built by John Wilgris, whose daughter is in the audience today. There was two sheds put together and attached with a roof. And Dinah and I were busy putting things in and out of the house. And I stepped out on the small deck out in front to pick up another box, and I noticed two children walking up the pathway with hesitant steps. And well, hello there, I said. Who might you be? I asked that casually, but I knew who they were anyway because we had met them the preceding December the 26th. But that being the day after Christmas, I didn't expect two small children to remember who we were anyway. Hello, I'm Ben Munger, he said. And this is my little sister Louisa. She's only 2. Holding up her hand as if to emphasize the fact that he was bigger. Louisa then ducked behind him a bit. Diana heard the conversation and came back out on the deck. Ben continued, my mother sent us over. She wants you to come to dinner tonight. Then with no discernible pause in his speech, he said, what happened to your finger? The day before, while returning our rental trailer to the rental office up in Santa Maria, the attendant had been a little less attentive, and he dropped the hitch on my left hand, neatly removing a fingernail on my left index finger. It was bandaged, but it was still, the blood was seeping through the bandage. And I said, nice to meet you, Ben and Louisa. then holding my bandaged finger up, at which point Louisa ducked behind her brother a little more. I said, I heard it yesterday while unloading a trailer, unhooking a trailer. Ben just nodded. My injury forgotten, our young visitors were more interested now in the boxes and things we had on the porch. There were some more questions about several objects, and we were glad to have the interruption because, as you know, packing and unpacking can be rather tiresome. And then without anything else to do, Ben shortly announced that they had to go home. Louisa, who still had not said a word, fell in behind Ben. "Oh, Ben," I called, "please tell your mother we'll be happy to accept her dinner invitation." He replied, he must have, but I don't remember what he said. Ben is one of a few words. He was courteous, so he must have answered. And then without any further ado, they left. Oops, I don't know. There is no better introduction to Ben than his own introduction to us. It exemplifies Ben's good qualities, his care, his duty, his directness, his courtesy, and his curiosity. Over the years, we were to observe more admirable traits: dedication, perseverance, honesty, sacrifice, musical talent, and yes, a sense of humor that sometimes manifested in ways that provided some of Midland's best whodunit mysteries, including one that was blamed on me at first. While we know from experience that many of Ben's sterling qualities were taught by his parents and exemplified by his siblings, some of his more latent skills may have been gained through DNA. I'm in debt to one of Midland's more scholarly faculty members, Kenneth Branagh, who in 1974 wrote a paper in which he noted that a Carlos Munger, spelled with an O, a lay abbot, established a school in Britain's East Midlands in the 14th century. I became intrigued by this bit of history and searched in depth for more information about Munger, and specifically the monastic-like school he founded and his descendants. I sought out some of the same resource materials Ken found useful. That research led me to discover that Munger and his wife had several children. The penultimate child, apparently a second son, almost as an infant, preferred playing outside in the Mercian dirt to the confines of the cloister. He would spend hours constructing miniature models of the gardens that lay within the walls of the school grounds. By the time this boy reached adolescence, he was tending real gardens, and his products were widely distributed throughout the Midlands. It is believed that Geoffrey Chaucer visited the school on several occasions. He must have had the fine produce of Munger in mind when he wrote about the Franklin and the Cook in the Canterbury Tales. There's even the possibility Munger was his model for the Franklin. It's well known there's even the possibility Munger was Chaucer's model for the Franklin, well known for setting a fine table. And quote, "A more envied man was nowhere found." Munger took great care of his land and his gardens. At this point in my search for a connecting link to Ben became a bit fuzzy and nebulous. I lost track but discovered that a Nicholas Munger, now spelled with a U, immigrated to Connecticut in the mid-16th century. It seems that Nicholas' intent was to take his skills in growing turnips to the colonies. Unfortunately, there are scant records of Nicholas and his farming products and his turnips. Discouraged in all this, in the gaping holes that seem to come up here, I turned my efforts to the Landreths, Ben's maternal lineage. And I found here a rather curious fragment of a letter from Jethro Tull, considered by many to be the father of modern agriculture, to one H. Landreth, who was assisting with the proving of the seed drill that he had just invented. Landreth, it turns out, also moved across the Atlantic to new farming grounds and packed along one of Tull's seed drills. The letter mentions this, but we're not sure if it was a warrant for an arrest for stealing the apparatus or if it was in praise. Though these connections may seem to some to be a bit weak or perhaps specious in nature, I'm convinced there's got to be some validity. If you consider Ben's love of the land and his stewardship of it, it's difficult to dismiss the descriptor that's in his blood. In 1972, Paul Squibb wrote in a letter to the Midland Mirror, quote, "Success at Midland lies in what one gives to the life about him rather than what he takes from it." There's a plethora of evidence Ben has contributed much to the life about him. If ever a person lived this expression that John mentioned, to leave a place better than you found it, it's Ben. One has to only look at Midland's farm, take a walk up here to the creek to see examples of his stewardship. I searched through my boxes of paraphernalia at home, junk and trivia, looking for something that I could latch onto that would be significant to this. We lost a lot of our early Midland memorabilia in an accidental fire back in '89, so I was at a loss for finding something. Many of you might remember, though, that I used to carry these little notepads around in my pocket for various things, mostly laps on and laps off. But there are other things in them too, other notations and such. And I'd almost given up my search for anything significant when I remembered that Ben's first year here as a student was our last year before taking what became a leave of absence for about 11 years. So I grabbed the box that had 1976 in it, and I came across this battered little notebook dated December 1975. And I was thumbing through it, and I found really important things like here, the first thing on the list was suggested presents for my father-in-law for Christmas, dinner with somebody, various things, $40 to my daughter, 12 years old at the time. We better talk about that after. And then here, dated January the 13th, 1976, I see 3 names, 2 of whom are in the audience today. Laps on, 5 each. The notation says incomplete jobs. I must have written a second laps on slip because Ben's name is crossed out, and underneath it I have in pencil, done with extra credit. So here you are. Ben, thank you for all your contributions to the school, to the students, to your colleagues, and to those who have Midland in the future. I can only add to this job well done with an abundance of extra credit.
Good morning. What a great weekend for making old and new connections we had this weekend. The 70s reunion was amazing, and it's so nice to have one of their own honored here today. So Ben, here you are. Teacher, coach, ranger, rancher, farmer, and so much more. Congratulations for this award. Still going strong as a new painted tractor and heading to another incredible school. Does Deep Springs have a clue? Not like we do. After 40-some years of Midland life, most of what you are came from right here. When does a man gather his talents? As a student, it wasn't long after arriving at Midland that I started to get to know Ben and his family. As the youngest in my family of all boys, I was drawn like a magnet to the family with kids close to my age and younger. Ben does have a couple of older sisters. It wasn't all boys school. As a chronic attendee of Carl's Chess and Checkers Club, I was soon interacting with the 2 preschoolers, Ben and Louisa, padding around in their one-piece flannels before having to hit the sack. I especially remember a foosball-esque game, hockey game, early lacrosse training, I'm sure, that Ben and I and others would play for months or years until it finally disintegrated. Ben started here with Mungers, Midland students, and faculty all around him. This is where he learned the gift of teaching. I worked on bicycles a lot when I was a student here. The Dead Bike Pile Mountain in Trash Canyon was an amazing place to get parts. So I guess it wasn't so far-fetched that I would be the one taking off Ben's training wheels and giving those last words of encouragement. With those final words of keep pedaling, Ben pulled away from my loping grasp and into the world of two wheels. This wouldn't be the last time that Ben and I would share a passion for two wheels. 3 or 4 years later, on one of my trips going north or south, I stopped in with a motorcycle in my van. Little did I know then that Ben, now 11, was already tearing around the countryside on a small dirt bike. His reverence for the land hadn't quite developed yet. My motorcycle was soon out of the van, and I was getting my first lesson in dirt bike riding somewhere beyond Greengate. Ben said that his dad soon made it clear that if he didn't stay on trails and roads, the bike would have to go, learning the respect of the land. Many bikes and decades later, we still go on rides. Whether in the Sierras, to Cody's backcountry home, or across the Santa Barbara Range, there are always adventures in the backcountry, and Ben finds his share. Soon I was hired at Midland, and Ben was a junior. Although a busy first year, somehow Ben got me to go on an overnight camping trip with his classmates Greg Good and Bob Bancroft. We drove off of Camino Cielo at the top of San Marcos Pass and down a steep dirt road into the upper reaches of the San Ynez River. We hiked a few miles up Indian Creek to a beautiful place with rock walls and great pools of water. After setting up camp, spending the afternoon swimming and having dinner, we settled in for the night. It was here that I first experienced a Munger camping mystique that has been reaffirmed for decades, and perhaps even yesterday. Sometime in the middle of the night, it started to rain. A mad scramble ensued, rigging our sleeping tarp into rain protection between bushes and trees and bunching together to stay dry. There was fitful sleep because I awoke to a wet sleeping bag and seeing a tarp-filled column of water touching my bag and by osmosis soaking me. We hiked out early, slightly damp, but warm with movement, surrounded by an amazing dark, drizzly cloud. Soon we were driving, and at the bottom of a slick, steep, muddy road, there were a half dozen cars and trucks making runs at trying to get out, none successful. After watching a while, Ben and the boys piled large boulders in the back of my camper and proceeded to climb on top of them. Soon it was our turn, and with a run at the bottom, we were quickly sliding off the road and into the uphill dirt gutter. Here, with the roadbed exposed by running water and hundreds of pounds over the rear wheel, we spun our way up and out of the valley floor. This was my experience with Ben and camping, but he'd already been camping all his life, developing his love of the wilderness and taking friends there, by wheels or horse or by foot. Ben explored the places he would later live near and work in. Years later, as a faculty member, he would win the Sanford Ballou III Outstanding Camper Award, just because it made sense. At Midland, Ben was also beginning to shine as a strong soccer and lacrosse player, voted captain in soccer for his senior year, and playing incredible lacrosse. Ben's classmates would write, "Ben has an accurate eye and incredible timing, baffling opponents and shocking teams with everlasting stamina and guts." Here is a quote from the End of Mirror lacrosse article. "We had the best player in the league, Ben Munger. Ben played every minute of every game at midfield, and he led the team in goals, assists, and ground balls. California coaches unanimously selected him as the Western States representative to high school All-American first team. Clearly, the sense of timing and understanding of the game dynamics came from his early years in hockey at chess club. Nonetheless, add teaching to this talent, and soon you have coaching. One of my favorite moments of Ben's senior year was Halloween night. As one of the school prefects his senior year, Ben stood in the doorway of Stillman during Halloween assembly. In scant rags and a crown of thorns, his costume was a very good likeness of Jesus, nailed to a full-size cross. Ben's sense of humor has an innate quality to it. Growing up with a Reverend Father must have had something to do with that moment. At least it did for me. I wasn't too surprised to have Ben begin working in Midland not long after he graduated from the University of Montana with Lori and soon to be Emma. I suppose what I missed was his need to join something else besides Midland. Studying archaeology in Montana had given him a way into the Forest Service, and 7 years after settling into Midland life, Ben went back to Montana to be an archaeologist ranger. Here he learned government land use, protecting archaeological sites, and Forest Service politics. Suffice it to say that after 6 or so years in Montana, the family returned to Midland in 1999. Upon his return, Ben stepped into Midland's new ranch management position, which oversaw the garden and the land outside of fence bounds. He has put up miles of fence so that our cattle, you see, can rotate his stock and not overgraze the land. He worked diligently towards certifying the farm organic. Through classes, sports, and jobs programs, and other alternate routes, he has worked with hundreds of students, teaching them the ins and outs of farming and ranching. It's been my fortune to work with Ben, and in recent years Katie, in continuing to strengthen our ability to get the farm produce to the table. We have worked many years on creating the right quantities of the easiest growing vegetables that teenagers will eat most of the time. This has not been an easy task. Finding produce that grows all year and keeping 100+ folks supplied has been daunting. Learning what produce could be frozen and planting enough for the year has been daunting. Maximizing our cattle and pigs to the school year has been daunting. Keeping ground squirrels, insects, and birds from eating everything has been daunting. Learning why, where, when, and how to buy and germinate a seed has been daunting. The thing is, these are all Ben's dauntings. Thank God I'm not on that side of the equation. The amount of labor it takes to get a school serving of carrots to the table in credit card vernacular is priceless. All to be consumed in less than 25 minutes. This is not to say that my side of the equation has been all fun and games. Multiple-legged carrots, grape-sized beets and potatoes, or onions with split personalities, to name a few. Even when everything is going well and the produce is amazing, two days later, there might be none. The best is none too good for the ground squirrel. Ben takes his plight with his usual nonchalance and sometimes a touch of self-fault, as if he had sent the locusts to destroy all. There is a sound and strong mind here, resilient to the diverse battles lost and won over the years of farming and tempered by teenagers. Although the risk and reward may be questionable for the farmer, the rest of us win as more and more Midland produce and meat finds its way into our diet. The steadfast shall conquer. So here you are, Ben. Teacher, coach, ranger, rancher, and farmer. You have definitely distinguished yourself here. The wheels of motion have been set and are heading in the right direction. So why not go take on alfalfa and college students? The next speaker will be Lori Munger.
he was going to write. There's a little bit of overlap here, so bear with me. I think Ben, in my mind, has always been an adventure seeker, and he shared a few memories of his time when he was really little here with me. I think the best one was that his mother, Kathy, when he was little, would tie, and I found out last night, a cowbell to the back of his overalls. So if he wandered out past the little fence they had in their backyard towards a soccer field, she could tell he was making his escape. Also, when he was little, he told me that Kathy would hold his hand when they would walk home from dinner when it was dark, like in the winter, because the barn opening is pretty scary, and he would be afraid, and she would always sing with the moon was out, I see the moon and the moon sees me, and that would get him home all safe and feeling protected. But also, I think when he got older, he didn't want to hold his mother's hand anymore. He told me he would bolt past that opening, because you never know. We've had kids drop dummies that look like people from the top of the scare students. I guess he jumped into the ash pit when he was about 4 or 5 with shorts on, cowboy boots, no socks, and a hot coal got stuck in between his boot and his ankles. He's got a scar from there, got a couple scars from growing up here. But jumping in to ash pits soon gave way to wheels, bicycles, go-karts, motorcycles. Riding motorcycles with Ernie Cody as fast as they could on the Catway, and then heading down Sulphur Springs Trail to the Manzana at a slightly slower pace. The Manzana, Ben's second home, where anything was possible. Swimming in deep pools, Ernie thinking he was picking up a dead rattlesnake when it happened to be alive swimming past him. Didn't turn out well. Riding the secret trails that were carved into the Los Padres National Forest. Helping John and Connie Cody build their house. Hauling large rocks from the creek for wall construction, mixing cement. Connie feeding them biscuits and gravy she cooked over a wood stove. Cutting down trees for beams. Many of you have seen the Cody's house in the backcountry. Everything's big, so trees were beams. And just being boys in the backcountry at a time when a kid came with less restrictions than operate today. Riding his bicycle down Grass Mountain after he pushed it up all the way. Riding a go-kart, which I think you made, I'm not sure, down the hill above Trash Canyon, and then convincing Carl that it was a good idea for him to also ride down that. He's told me that he would have liked riding horses more, like Louisa, if only the horse had handlebars coming out of its ears. Exploring Trash Canyon, which is a magical place, or it used to be, where you could get lost for hours and always find something useful to bring back. And as BG has said, playing soccer, lacrosse, and baseball, voted All-American for lacrosse as a senior, I guess, I'm not sure. And hiking the Thatcher with David Anderson, who I see out in the audience. And then hiking the Manzana Sisquoc Loop as a sophomore with his entire class, and having Sherman Herrick do a mail drop at South Fork Station from his airplane, dropping their mail down to them. I don't think anything could get better than that on a camping trip, unless it was a whole bunch of Hershey bars or something. So adventure, exploring, getting off the trail has always been Ben's MO. The Munger Mile is a real thing. Many of you have experienced the Munger Mile. Ben wanders out of curiosity and not being in a hurry to reach a destination. He even uses hiking in his mind, say hiking down the trail from Naira, to help him fall asleep. And the next morning he'll say, well, I made it to Coldwater, or Horseshoe Bend, before I dozed off. Mountains have always been a draw for Ben. Growing up at the base of the San Rafaels, and then going to college in Missoula, Montana, in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, and later following his interest in archaeology, we lived in various sized mountain towns along the way. Kalispell and Dillon, Montana, Red River, Idaho, which is not really a town, but it's near a town called Grangeville, which we refer to as Strangeville. And we spent a couple of summers along Fish Creek in the Great Burn proposed wilderness area outside Missoula. The Great Burn would later become Ben's research site for his master's in high mountain archaeology. We even invested in property on the west side of the Sierras to have a mountain home to go to after Midland. And soon we'll wake up seeing the White Mountains in the foreground and the peaks of the Eastern Sierra on the horizon. So complicated story short, we've been back and forth to Montana a couple of times. We arrived at Midland in August 1985 to teach, and Ben taught 9th grade history and an art class, coached soccer and lacrosse for the first few years, until he decided to go back to school at UCSB in 1989 for his master's in archaeology. But his plan was to ultimately get a permanent job with the Forest Service. Ben spent the next 10 years doing archaeology for the Los Padres National Forest, locally here, and ultimately landing a permanent job, the job of his dreams, in the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest in southwest Montana during the mid-90s. He was always out in the field every day. Well, not in the winter, but when there was no snow. Driving dirt roads all day long, surveying timber sales and the like for any significant archaeological materials. When Ben found a place worth visiting, which were many, we would grab Emma and load up the truck with camping gear, 2 or 3 dogs, and off we'd go for the weekend. Recently, looking at pictures from this time with Emma, I'd forgotten how many wild places Ben and